I remember the exact moment everything changed. A kid nobody noticed stood up when everyone else stayed silent, and what happened next left an entire auditorium speechless. Before I continue, if stories like this inspire you, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next ones. My name is Marcus, and I was 9 years old when this happened. I lived in a small apartment on the east side of Philadelphia with my mom and my little sister. My mom worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices at night and another serving breakfast at a diner on weekends. Money was always tight. I wore my cousin's old clothes. My backpack had duct tape holding the straps together, and lunch at school was whatever the free meal program offered that day. I wasn't ashamed of it, not really. It was just how things were. But I knew other kids noticed. They always do. That year, our school was preparing for the annual talent show. It was a big deal. The kind of event where parents showed up with cameras and teachers wore their best clothes. The auditorium would be packed. Kids had been practicing for weeks. Some were doing dance routines, others were singing popular songs, and a few were showing off magic tricks they learned from YouTube. I never thought about participating. Kids like me didn't do that kind of thing. We stayed in the background, kept our heads down, and tried not to draw attention to ourselves. But there was this one kid in my class, David Chen. He was quiet, small for his age, and wore thick glasses that always slid down his nose. David was the kind of kid who ate lunch alone, not because he was mean or weird, but because he was invisible. Nobody bothered him, but nobody really talked to him either. He was just there, a shadow moving through the hallways. I noticed him because I recognized something in him. That feeling of being on the outside, watching everyone else live their lives while you just tried to get through the day, without anyone noticing you were struggling. About 3 weeks before the talent show, David did something unexpected. He signed up to perform. The whole class was surprised when Mrs. Patterson announced it during morning attendance. David Chen was going to play the violin. I didn't even know he played violin. None of us did. But there it was, his name on the list, right between a girl doing a gymnastics routine and twin brothers who were going to perform a comedy sketch. The days leading up to the show were normal enough. Kids practiced during recess and lunch. The excitement was building. Then I started noticing something. A group of boys from the 6th grade, led by this kid named Tyler Morrison, had started targeting David. Tyler was one of those kids who came from money. His dad owned a car dealership, and Tyler made sure everyone knew it. He wore expensive sneakers, had the latest phone, and always had cash for whatever he wanted at lunch. But having money didn't make him kind. It actually seemed to make him meaner, like he needed everyone else to feel small so he could feel big. I first heard Tyler making fun of David in the hallway between classes. He was doing this exaggerated impression, pretending to play an invisible violin while making screeching sounds. His friends were laughing, and David just kept walking, his face red, staring at the floor. I felt something twist in my stomach, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my business. I had enough problems without getting on Tyler Morrison's radar. But it kept happening. Tyler would make comments in the cafeteria, loud enough for David to hear but quiet enough that teachers couldn't catch him. He'd bump into David in the hallway and say things like, "Watch where you're going, orchestra boy," or "Better practice, Chen, wouldn't want to embarrass yourself." David never responded. He just took it day after day, his shoulders hunching a little more each time. The day before the talent show, something changed. I was in the bathroom washing my hands when I heard voices from one of the stalls. It was David, and he was crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but that quiet kind where you're trying not to let anyone hear you. The kind of crying I recognized because I'd done it myself plenty of times. I stood there, frozen, not sure what to do. Then I heard him talking to himself, so quietly I almost couldn't make it out. He was saying, I can do this, over and over, like a prayer or a promise he was trying to keep. I left without saying anything. I felt like a coward, but I also didn't know what to say. What could I possibly tell him that would help? That bullies like Tyler eventually leave you alone? That wasn't true, they didn't leave you alone. They just found new ways to make you feel worthless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David in that bathroom stall, trying to convince himself he was strong enough to get through tomorrow. I thought about all the times I'd felt exactly like that. All the times I'd wanted to disappear because being invisible felt safer than being seen. And I thought about my mom, working herself to exhaustion every single day, never complaining, never giving up. She always told me that how you treat people when they're down says more about you than anything else. I realized I had a choice to make. I could keep being invisible or I could do something that mattered. The next day arrived. The auditorium was filling up fast. Parents were claiming the best seats, teachers were checking the sound system, and performers were gathering backstage, some excited and some terrified. I found David sitting alone in a corner, holding his violin case like it was a life preserver. His hands were shaking. I walked over and sat down next to him. He looked at me surprised. We'd never really talked before. I said, "Hey." He said, "Hey," back. There was a long silence. Then I told him, "I heard you practicing last week in the music room. You're really good." His eyes widened. He stammered, "You did?" I nodded. "Yeah, you're going to do great today." He looked down at his violin case. "I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have signed up. Tyler and his friends keep saying I'm going to mess up and embarrass myself." I felt that anger rise up in my chest again. Tyler Morrison is a jerk who needs to put other people down to feel important. Don't let him take this from you. David gave me a small smile. It wasn't much, but it was something. We sat there together until it was almost time for the show to start. Then we headed to our seats in the auditorium. I sat with my mom and sister near the back. My mom had managed to get off work early, which almost never happened. She squeezed my hand and smiled at me. She always knew when something was weighing on me. The show started. Act after act went up. Some were good, some were okay, and some were kind of a mess. But everyone clapped anyway. That's how these things went. Finally, Mrs. Patterson announced David Chen. The curtains opened, and there he was, standing alone on that big stage with his violin. He looked so small up there. The auditorium fell quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. Then I heard it. From somewhere in the middle rows, Tyler Morrison's voice cut through the silence. "This is going to be hilarious," he said, loud enough for half the auditorium to hear. A few of his friends snickered. David froze. I watched his face go pale. His hands started shaking worse than before. He lifted the violin to his shoulder, positioned the bow, and then just stood there. The seconds stretched out. People started shifting in their seats. Someone coughed. I could see parents exchanging glances. David was panicking, and that's when something inside me snapped. I didn't think about it, I didn't plan it, I just stood up. My mom whispered, "Marcus, what are you doing?" But I was already moving. I walked down the aisle toward the stage, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The entire auditorium turned to look at me. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, watching this kid in worn-out clothes and taped-up shoes making his way to the front. I didn't care. I climbed the stairs onto the stage. David stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I walked right up to him and stood next to him. The auditorium was dead silent now. I turned to face all those people, all those eyes, and I said loud and clear, "David is my friend, and he's about to show all of you something amazing. So everyone needs to shut up and listen." My voice cracked a little on the last word, but I got it out. I looked directly at where Tyler was sitting, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can come talk to me after. I heard my mom gasp. I heard a teacher say my name in that warning tone adults use, but I also heard something else. I heard someone start clapping, then another person, then more. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was applauding. Not polite applause, but real, genuine support. I looked at David. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. He took a deep breath, nodded at me, and lifted his violin again. And then David started to play. The sound that came from that violin was nothing like what I expected. It wasn't just good, it was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you forget where you are and just exist in the music. David's fingers moved across the strings with precision and grace. Every note was perfect. His bow glided back and forth like he'd been doing this his entire life. The auditorium was completely silent except for the music. Parents who'd been checking their phones stopped. Kids who'd been fidgeting sat perfectly still. Even the teachers looked amazed. I stood there next to him, watching David transform. He wasn't the scared, invisible kid anymore. He was an artist, sharing something profound and real with everyone in that room. His eyes were closed. His whole body moved with the music. Whatever he was playing, I didn't know the name, but it felt important. It felt like hope. It felt like every person who'd ever been counted out or underestimated or told they weren't good enough was speaking through those strings. The piece went on for maybe 4 minutes. though it felt both longer and shorter than that. When David played the final note, letting it hang in the air before lowering his bow, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the auditorium exploded. People jumped to their feet, cheering and clapping and shouting. I saw parents wiping their eyes. I saw teachers beaming. I saw kids who'd never paid attention to David Chen in their lives standing and applauding like they'd just witnessed something historic. David opened his eyes and looked out at the crowd. Then he looked at me, and he smiled. A real, genuine, full smile that lit up his whole face. I smiled back. We walked off stage together while the applause continued. Backstage, David was immediately surrounded by other kids congratulating him, asking him questions, wanting to know where he learned to play like that. He handled it with quiet grace, thanking everyone, still a little overwhelmed, but clearly happy. My mom found me after the show. She didn't say anything at first. She just pulled me into a hug that lasted a long time. When she finally pulled back, she had tears in her eyes. She said, "I'm so proud of you." That's all, but it meant everything. If this story has moved you so far, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because there are other real and emotional stories you can't miss. Tyler Morrison never bothered David again after that day. In fact, Tyler seemed to go out of his way to avoid both of us. A few days later, David and I started eating lunch together. Then a couple other kids joined us. Then more. By the end of that week, David wasn't invisible anymore. Neither was I. We'd both been seen, really seen, and it changed something fundamental about how we move through the world. But that wasn't even the biggest thing that happened. About 2 weeks after the talent show, David and I were called to the principal's office. We walked there together, both of us nervous because getting called to the principal's office was never good news. When we got there, Mrs. Patterson was waiting for us with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. She told us to sit down. Then she explained that someone in the audience that night had been a representative from the Philadelphia Youth Arts Foundation. They'd been there to scout for talented students to offer scholarships to their summer intensive program. It was one of the most prestigious programs in the state, giving kids access to world-class instruction in music, theater, and visual arts. The representative had been so moved by David's performance and by what I'd done to support him that they were offering both of us full scholarships. David would study violin under master teachers, and I would have the opportunity to explore different artistic disciplines to find what spoke to me. Everything would be covered, including supplies, transportation, and lunch. We wouldn't have to worry about cost at all. I couldn't believe it. Neither could David. We both just sat there staring at Mrs. Patterson like she was speaking a foreign language. She laughed and said, "Boys, this is real. You both earned this." David started crying right there in the principal's office. Happy tears this time. I felt my own eyes getting wet. This wasn't just a summer program. This was a door opening to a future I'd never even let myself imagine. When we told our families, my mom broke down completely. She sat at our tiny kitchen table with the acceptance letter in her hands and just sobbed. My little sister asked if she was sad, and my mom shook her head and said, "No, baby, these are happy tears. Your brother did something wonderful." She pulled me close and whispered, "This is going to change your life." I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I believed something good was actually going to happen. David's parents were equally emotional. His mom called my mom that same evening, and they talked for almost an hour. Two families who'd never met, connected by what their sons had experienced together. They made plans to meet for coffee. They wanted to celebrate properly. It felt surreal. A few weeks ago, David and I were both invisible. Now our families were becoming friends, and we had this incredible opportunity ahead of us. The summer program started in June. The first day, my mom dropped me off at the Arts Center downtown. It was this beautiful old building with high ceilings and huge windows that let in streams of sunlight. There were practice rooms, studios, a small theater, and a gallery space where student work was displayed. I'd never been in a place like this. Everything felt important and creative and alive. I was terrified and excited at the same time. David was already there when I arrived, holding his violin case and talking to an older man with white hair and kind eyes. That was Mr. Levinson, David's instructor for the summer. He was a retired symphony violinist who'd played all over the world. David introduced us, and Mr. Levinson shook my hand firmly. He said, "You're the young man who stood up for David." That took real courage. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He smiled. Courage is an art form too. Don't forget that. My first week was spent exploring different disciplines. I tried painting, but I wasn't very good at it. My brushstrokes were clumsy and my color choices were all wrong. I tried sculpture, working with clay, and that was slightly better, but still not quite right. I tried theater, but being on stage made me anxious in a way that felt different from when I'd walked up there to help David. That had been about protecting someone. This was about being seen for myself, and I wasn't ready for that yet. Then I discovered photography. The instructor, Ms. Rodriguez, handed me an old digital camera and told me to go walk around the neighborhood and photograph whatever caught my eye. No rules, no guidelines, just see what happened. I spent 2 hours wandering the streets near the arts center. I photographed an elderly man sitting on his front steps feeding pigeons. I photographed a mural on the side of a bodega, bright colors peeling but still beautiful. I photographed a kid's chalk drawing on the sidewalk, half washed away by rain. I photographed shadows and light and ordinary moments that felt somehow significant when framed through a lens. When I came back and showed Ms. Rodriguez my photos, she went quiet for a long time. She clicked through each image slowly, studying them. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "You have an eye for this. You see things other people miss." Something in my chest loosened. I'd spent so much of my life trying not to be seen that I'd never considered what it meant to truly see. To notice the details, the emotions, the stories hiding in plain sight. Photography gave me a way to do that. It gave me a voice that didn't require words. From that day on, I spent every session with Ms. Rodriguez, learning about composition, lighting, perspective, and timing. She taught me that photography wasn't just about capturing what was in front of you. It was about capturing how it made you feel, and making other people feel that too. She lent me the camera to take home at night, and I would walk around my neighborhood photographing everything. My mom hanging laundry on our tiny balcony, my sister drawing with crayons at the kitchen table, the corner store owner closing up shop, the streetlights coming on at dusk. I was documenting my world, and in doing so I was learning to appreciate it in ways I never had before. David was thriving too. I'd hear him practicing in one of the soundproof rooms, and even through the walls you could tell he was getting better. Mr. Levinson was pushing him hard, but in a good way, teaching him advanced techniques, introducing him to complex pieces, encouraging him to find his own interpretation of the music rather than just following the notes. David was becoming more confident too. He walked taller. He spoke up more. He made friends with other musicians in the program. Watching him transform was almost as rewarding as my own transformation. About halfway through the summer, the program announced they were putting together a showcase. All the students would have an opportunity to present their work to an audience of families, donors, and community members. The musicians would perform, the visual artists would display their pieces, the actors would do scenes, and the photographers would have their work projected on a large screen while they talked about their process and inspiration. My stomach dropped when they announced it. The idea of standing in front of people and talking about my photographs made me want to disappear again. Ms. Rodriguez must have seen the panic on my face because she pulled me aside after the announcement. She said, "You don't have to do this if you're not ready, but I think you should. Your work deserves to be seen." I told her I didn't think I could talk in front of all those people. She smiled. "Marcus, you walked onto a stage in front of a full auditorium to defend your friend. You can do this." She was right. But it felt different. That night with David, I'd been reacting on instinct. This would be planned, deliberate, exposed. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I selected 15 photographs that told a story about my neighborhood, my family, and the beauty in everyday struggle. There was a photo of my mom's hands, worn and calloused from work but still gentle. A photo of my sister laughing, missing her 2 front teeth. A photo of our apartment building at sunrise, golden light hitting the brick in a way that made it look almost majestic. A photo of the bus stop where people waited each morning, everyone tired but still showing up, still trying. Each image meant something to me. Each one was a piece of my life that I was choosing to share. The night before the showcase, I couldn't eat dinner. My mom noticed and sat down next to me. She asked what was wrong, and I told her I was scared. Scared people would judge my work. Scared they'd see where I came from and think less of me. Scared I'd mess up and embarrass myself and prove that kids like me didn't belong in places like the art center. My mom listened to everything, and then she took my face in her hands. She said, "Marcus, you've already proven you belong. You did that the night you stood up for David. You did that every day you showed up to this program and worked hard. These photographs, they're beautiful because they're honest. They're your truth, and your truth is nothing to be ashamed of." Her words helped, but I was still nervous. She told me she'd be in the front row, and that was enough. Knowing she'd be there, supporting me no matter what happened. The showcase was on a Saturday evening. The art center was packed. I saw families dressed up, kids running around excited, teachers greeting parents. David found me backstage. He looked calm, which surprised me because he'd been so nervous at the last performance. He told me, "This time is different. We're not alone." He was right. We had each other. We had our families. We had a whole community of people who'd spent the summer creating and learning together. The showcase started with the musicians. David was in the middle of the lineup. When his turn came, he walked out confidently, adjusted his glasses, lifted his violin, and played a piece by Bach. It was technical and complicated, but he made it sound effortless. The audience was captivated. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. I saw Mr. Levinson in the audience beaming with pride. David's parents were crying. My mom was clapping so hard I could hear her from backstage. Then came the visual artists, displaying paintings and sculptures that ranged from abstract to realistic. Some were stunning, some were experimental. All of them showed growth and effort. The actors performed scenes from classic plays, bringing characters to life with energy and commitment. And then it was time for the photographers. There were 3 of us presenting. I was going last. The first photographer showed images of nature, forests and streams captured in perfect light. They were gorgeous. The second showed street photography from downtown, busy intersections and crowded sidewalks full of movement. They were dynamic and exciting. Then Ms. Rodriguez introduced me. She said a few words about my dedication and natural talent, and then I walked out onto the small stage they'd set up. The lights dimmed. My first photograph appeared on the screen behind me. It was the image of my mom's hands. I took a breath and started talking. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. I explained that these were the hands that had worked 2 jobs to keep our family afloat, the hands that had sacrificed everything so my sister and I could have opportunities, the hands that had held me when I cried and pushed me forward when I wanted to give up. I looked at my mom in the front row. She was already crying. The next image was my sister drawing at the table. I talked about innocence and hope, about how kids could find joy even in small moments, about how she reminded me every day that happiness didn't require money or status. It required presence and love. The image after that was our apartment building. I explained that people might see it as rundown or forgotten, but to me it was home. It was where I learned about resilience and community, where neighbors looked out for each other, where we made something out of nothing every single day. I went through each photograph telling the story behind it. The bus stop represented determination. The bodega mural represented creativity thriving in unexpected places. The elderly man feeding pigeons represented kindness that costs nothing but means everything. With each image, I felt myself relaxing. This wasn't about being judged. This was about sharing truth, about showing people that beauty and dignity exist everywhere if you're willing to see them. My final photograph was one I'd taken the week before. It was David and me, sitting on the front steps of the Arts Center, laughing about something I couldn't even remember now. Ms. Rodriguez had taken it without us knowing. When I saw it, I asked if I could include it in my showcase. She said absolutely. I displayed it on the screen and said, "This photo represents what happens when someone believes in you, when someone stands with you instead of against you, when you find friendship in unexpected places." Everything changed for me the night I decided to stop being invisible. And everything changed again when this program showed me I had something worth sharing. The auditorium was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone joined in. People stood up. My mom was sobbing openly now, and my sister was bouncing in her seat with excitement. David was standing and clapping too, grinning at me. Ms. Rodriguez was wiping her eyes. I saw people in the audience who I didn't even know looking genuinely moved. In that moment, I understood something profound. My story mattered. My perspective mattered. My life, despite all its struggles and imperfections, had value worth documenting and sharing. After the showcase, people came up to talk to me. Parents thanked me for sharing something so honest. Other students told me they related to my photographs in different ways. One woman, who introduced herself as a journalist for the local newspaper, asked if she could interview me about my experience. She wanted to write a story about the program and feature my work. I looked at my mom, unsure. She nodded encouragingly. I said yes. The interview happened a few days later at a coffee shop near the art center. The journalist, her name was Laura, asked me questions about my background, about the talent show, about discovering photography. She was genuinely interested, not in a pitying way, but in a respectful, curious way. She asked what I wanted people to understand about kids from neighborhoods like mine. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I told her, I want people to know we're not statistics or problems to be solved. We're just kids trying to find our place in the world, same as anyone else. We have talents and dreams and things to offer. Sometimes we just need someone to give us a chance. She wrote everything down carefully. Before she left, she told me she thought my photographs and my story could inspire a lot of people. I didn't know if I believed that, but I appreciated her saying it. The article came out 2 weeks later. Laura had written a full-page feature with several of my photographs printed in color. The headline read, "Seeing the Unseen, How One Act of Courage Opened Doors for 2 Philadelphia Students." My mom bought 5 copies of the newspaper. She kept one for herself and sent the others to relatives. My aunt called from Virginia crying. My grandmother, who I barely knew because she lived so far away, mailed me a card with $20 inside and a note that said, "Keep taking pictures, keep telling our stories." The response was bigger than any of us expected. The Art Center received donations specifically designated for scholarships after the article ran. People from the community reached out wanting to support the program. A local gallery owner contacted Ms. Rodriguez asking if I'd be interested in displaying some of my work in a group show they were organizing for emerging young artists. I thought it was a joke at first. Ms. Rodriguez assured me it wasn't. She said my voice was important and people wanted to hear it. David's life was changing too. After the showcase, Mr. Levinson connected him with the youth orchestra program at the Philadelphia Symphony. They offered him a spot, along with a mentor who would work with him throughout the school year. David's parents were overwhelmed with gratitude. His mom called my mom again, and this time they met for lunch. They talked about how proud they were of us, how scared they'd been that we'd get lost in the system, overlooked and forgotten. Now we were being celebrated. It felt impossible and real at the same time. The summer program ended in early August. On the last day, we had a closing ceremony where each student received a certificate and the instructor said a few words. Ms. Rodriguez called me up individually. She handed me the camera I'd been using all summer. I tried to give it back, but she closed my hands around it. She said, "This is yours now. Keep documenting. Keep seeing. The world needs your perspective." I couldn't speak. I just hugged her. She'd given me more than a camera. She'd given me a future I could actually imagine. When school started again in September, everything felt different. David and I walked in together that first day and people noticed us. Not in a bad way, but in a way that acknowledged we existed. Kids said hello. Teachers smiled at us. We weren't invisible anymore. Tyler Morrison transferred to a private school over the summer, which honestly was a relief for everyone. Without him setting the tone, the whole social dynamic shifted. Kids who'd been quiet started speaking up more. Kids who'd been mean started questioning why they acted that way. David and I started a photography and music club after school. We figured if the arts had changed our lives, maybe we could help other kids find that same outlet. We expected maybe 5 or 6 people to show up to the first meeting. 23 kids came. Some wanted to learn photography. Some wanted to learn instruments. Some just wanted a place where they could be creative without judgment. We met twice a week in the music room. Ms. Patterson gave us permission and even helped us get some donated supplies. One of the kids who joined was this girl named Aisha. She was in 8th grade, quiet, always drawing in the margins of her notebooks during class. She told us she loved art, but her family couldn't afford lessons or supplies. I remembered that feeling so clearly, that hunger to create, but not having the resources. David and I pooled some money from odd jobs we'd been doing and bought her a sketchbook and a set of pencils. When we gave them to her, she cried. She said no one had ever done something like that for her before. I told her, "Someone did it for us. Now we're doing it for you, and someday you'll do it for someone else." That became the core principle of our club. We shared what we had. We taught each other. If someone learned a new technique, they showed everyone else. If someone was struggling, we figured it out together. It wasn't fancy or professional, but it was ours. It was a space where kids who felt invisible could be seen, where kids who felt worthless could discover they had something valuable to offer. My photography kept improving. I started carrying the camera everywhere, documenting moments throughout the day. I photographed the club meetings, capturing kids lost in their creative flow. I photographed my neighborhood in different seasons, showing how the same streets could look completely different depending on the light and weather. I photographed my mom and sister, building a visual history of our family. Every image was a piece of a larger story I was telling about resilience and hope, and finding beauty in struggle. The gallery show happened in October. It was a Friday evening at a small gallery in Old City. My work was displayed alongside 5 other young photographers from across Philadelphia. I had 10 photographs on the wall, each one matted and framed professionally. Seeing them like that, in a real gallery with proper lighting, felt surreal. These images that had come from my camera, from my perspective, were being treated as legitimate art. People were standing in front of them, really looking, really thinking about what they meant. My whole family came. My mom wore a dress I'd never seen before. She looked beautiful. My sister kept running up to my photographs and pointing, shouting, "That's Mommy, that's our building," with pure pride. David came with his parents. Ms. Rodriguez came. Mrs. Patterson came. Even some kids from school showed up. The gallery owner introduced me to several people, collectors and other artists who said encouraging things about my work. One man, who owned a photography studio downtown, gave me his card and told me to call him when I turned 16. He said he could use an assistant with my eye for detail. But the moment that meant the most happened near the end of the evening. An elderly black woman stood in front of my photograph of the bus stop for a long time. I watched her from across the room. She wasn't moving, just staring at the image. Finally, I walked over and introduced myself. She turned to me with tears running down her face. She said, "I've been riding that bus for 42 years. Going to work, coming home, day after day. Nobody ever looked at that bus stop and saw beauty. But you did. You saw us. You saw that we matter." She hugged me right there in the gallery, this stranger who understood exactly what I'd been trying to communicate. That ordinary people living ordinary lives are worthy of attention and respect. That struggle doesn't make you less than. That showing up every day, doing your best with what you have, is its own form of heroism. I hugged her back and thanked her. She'd given me confirmation that my work was connecting with people in the way I'd hoped. The local news came to do a story about the gallery show. They interviewed me and showed clips of my photographs on the evening broadcast. Suddenly, people I didn't know were recognizing me on the street. The corner store owner congratulated me. The bus driver who took me to school every day told me she'd seen me on TV. My mom's coworkers were talking about it at the diner. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. David's success continued paralleling mine. He performed with the youth orchestra in November, a concert at the Kimmel Center that my whole family attended. Watching him on that stage, playing with professional musicians in front of hundreds of people, I felt this profound sense of pride and gratitude. We'd both come so far from that day in the school auditorium. We'd both discovered parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. That Christmas was different from any Christmas we'd had before. My mom had saved up and bought me a nice camera bag and some books about famous photographers. Under the tree was also an envelope. Inside was a letter from the Philadelphia Youth Arts Foundation. They were offering me a full scholarship to continue in their advanced program for the next 3 summers, including specialized workshops with professional photographers. David got a similar letter for the music program. We called each other immediately, both of us yelling into the phone with excitement. But not everything was perfect. There were still hard days. Days when I felt like I didn't belong in artistic spaces because I didn't have the same background as other kids. Days when I missed a perfect photograph because I was working an after-school job to help my mom with bills. Days when I wondered if any of this would actually lead to a real career, or if I was just fooling myself. David had similar struggles. The pressure to be perfect, to represent everyone who'd invested in him, sometimes felt crushing. We talked about it often, reminding each other that we didn't have to have everything figured out. We just had to keep showing up and doing the work. In January, something unexpected happened. A private school across the city, one of those prestigious places with manicured lawns and buildings that looked like castles, reached out to my mom. They'd seen the news coverage and the newspaper article. They were starting a new scholarship initiative for talented students from underserved communities. They wanted to offer me a spot for high school starting the following fall. Everything would be covered: tuition, books, supplies, lunch, even transportation. It was the kind of opportunity that seemed too good to be true. My mom and I visited the campus on a gray February morning. The school was beautiful but intimidating. Kids walked around in uniforms, carrying expensive laptops, talking about college prep courses and SAT tutors. I felt out of place immediately. But then we met with the director of the scholarship program, a woman named Dr. Harrison. She showed us the photography lab, the dark room, the digital editing stations. She introduced me to the art teacher, who'd seen my work and was genuinely excited about the possibility of having me as a student. She explained that the school was committed to diversity not just in admissions but in creating an environment where every student felt valued. I wanted to say yes immediately, but I also felt guilty. What about the kids in my current school who didn't get this opportunity? What about David? Dr. Harrison seemed to read my mind. She told us they'd also reached out to David about their music program. He was considering it too. That made the decision easier, knowing I wouldn't be leaving him behind. My mom asked me what I wanted to do. I looked around at the resources, the possibilities, the future this place represented. I said yes. David said yes too. That fall, we both started at our new school. The transition was harder than I expected. The academic rigor was intense. Kids had been preparing for this level of work their entire lives. I was catching up, learning study skills I'd never needed before, pushing myself in ways that were exhausting. But the photography program made it worthwhile. I had access to equipment and instruction that most people didn't get until college. I was creating work that was more sophisticated and intentional. My portfolio was growing.